right. Two tails, one head, yin yang. Two heads, one tail, yang yin. Two tails, one head, yin yang. It's like a little robot head. Sleepy Joe. Two heads, one tail, one, yang yin. Two tails, one head, yang yang. It's my mom's watch. These are glasses. Can't see very well in them. Two tails, one head. Young, young. Our bottom trigram will be read as solid, broken, solid. This is Li, fire, and light. Li is fire and light, both inner and outer. As an inner light, she is consciousness at its most lucid and unclouded, holding things together in the mind, perceiving their differences and connections, and discerning the underlying patterns of relationship. And as well as vision, Li is the light that makes things visible, the power to cast light on things, spreading clarity and the awareness of order. Li is the middle daughter, living in the south, the region of midsummer and the burning sun. The top or outer trigram will be read as broken, solid, solid. It says Xun, wind or wood. Xun is both wind and living plants. Whatever penetrates, spreads, and grows, shaping itself to the space available or shaping that space to its own nature. She is responsive flexibility, sensitively improvising and adapting. Like the wind, she can always find a way through because she never creates any resistance. And so her influence is subtle and gradual, but far-reaching. In the family of trigrams, Xun is the eldest daughter, gentle and submissive. She belongs to the southeast and to late spring and early summer. Xun, wind or wood above Li, fire and light give us a hexagram of 37. Since we had no changing lines, we'll also just right up front get our secret hexagram, since we don't have a supporting hexagram. The way we do that is take the second, third, and fourth lines as the bottom trigram, and the third, fourth, and fifth lines as the top. So that would give us broken, solid, broken, which is con water, and then that would be beneath solid, broken, solid, which is Li, fire, and light, or light, which is hexagram 63. Completion. Is that accurate? Nope. We have Li, fire, and light. Give it to me again. Broken, solid, broken, solid, broken, solid. Oh, that's after. 64. Broken, solid, broken. Yep. Yep, sure as shit. Not yet a cross. Last hexagram of the I Ching. I wrote S hex for secret hexagram and it just looks like hex. But with like an emphasis on the H. If you can even read my writing. If I can even read it. All right, so let's get the titles of these bad boys. Almost said bad babies. What the fuck? 37, our primary hexagram, is people in the home, governing the inner, refining the self, mastering the mind, turning the attention inward. My God. The last people in the home we got as a primary hexagram was a significant reading. We're still having like a transition process, but this is good auspice, I think. Secret hexagram 64, which is the hidden influence behind this situation, is unsettled, refining the self, repelling mundanity, waiting for the time to restore the primordial celestial positivity. As promised, I have the new deck on the, what is the deck called again? And it says I Ching Shadow Integration Oracle. So we're going to also be using that. I will say, don't actually run out and buy this iteration of it, because I'll just give you a for instance. I've had to go through because they mistitled and misprinted some stuff. They didn't have the numbers on, so I put those. And as I was going through, I realized, holy shit, some of them don't even have the correct title with the writing. And so I had to change everything but the writing. And I even whited out a bunch of sections here to make the I Ching, the hexagram look correct. And I took a Sharpie and wrote on the... But when I put them together, the whiteout, yeah, just sticks to the back of the other card and comes off. So this is maybe a 2-hour project, maybe an hour and 45 minutes at least, to get those in workable condition. But I think it's going to be worth it. We'll see. So first things first, we will go into people in the home, or hexagram 37 from Kibi's I Ching Tarot. Good connection. I think another way this could be called, and I think it's called this in that other oracle, is family. Or you could call it people in the home 37. Almost looks like Christmas colors. And like, I'm thinking robots today. Baby robot, daddy robot, mommy robot. Or like that weird bear. Creepy bear off of FNAF. My kids watch that. Used to. Whatever the fuck it's called. Five Nights at Freddy's. Alright. 37 people in the home. That's correct. What Kibi says of 37 is good connection, mind harmony, view of husband and wife, There is fire, knowledge in the house. Wind, virtue, is born. Also, because there is wind, it is a good relationship to partner that allows the fire to continue burning. Or it could be an altar. Play this game. Sometimes I post pictures of it when it seems significant. It's like a gem matching game, right? On my cell phone. But it's like pattern recognition. And they're each associated with one of the, it's called Gems of War, elements. And this month, sometimes it's significant where the things that I'm seeing in this game are relevant to me, at least in my symbology. They have this whole altar thing that you go through these series of quests, and then you piece together this spider lord's altar or something like that. But I've got it to the point where the altar is there and there's a partially open scroll sitting on top of it. It almost looks like that. And then last hexagram, 64, secret hexagram, which is the hidden influence behind the situation, incompletion. Mm. 64, incompletion. Unorganized, unfinished, repetitive. All the lines, 6 Yao positions are unjust, but all lines positions are helping each other. Through repeated failures and successes, it takes time, but you will make great progress. Now we will look at them through this crazy deck. Bye. If you're watching, I love your deck, but you've got to like fix it so that people can use it. By clearly realign your path. See, whatever. I Ching Shadow Integration Oracle. Creepy face on the front. Hopefully it's Carl Jung. Okay, hexagram 37. Yeah, the family. I just did this not 2 hours ago, so. And this is what this craziness looks like after I completely obliterated it. The family. The family signifies the order within the household, the foundation of society, and the importance of clear roles and communication. It represents intimate relationships, mutual support, and shared values. Harmony begins at home. Examine your foundational relationships and how they reflect your inner dynamics. Integrate any shadow of unresolved family patterns or dysfunctional roles by consciously nurturing healthy bonds. True belonging starts with your inner family. Yeah, man. See what I tell you. I got you. Hour and 45 minutes at least to get this workable just for you all for tonight. So, you're welcome. And before completion, our secret hexagram, which is the hidden influence behind the situation. Before completion signifies a state of transition, anticipation, and the challenges just before a goal is reached. It represents a period of potential chaos and the need for careful planning and perseverance. This threshold of success requires diligence. You are on the cusp of significant resolution. Maintain focus and address any remaining details with care. Integrate the shadow of impatience or fear of failure by trusting the unfolding process and tying up loose ends. The final steps are often the most crucial. Wow. All right. Now we will read from Hilary Barrett's I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future, on our hexagrams. 37, people in the home, which is what she calls it. When we approach the I Ching to consult the Oracle, the questions we bring to it will always have the general context. How can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time? Hexagram 37, people in the home. Key questions. Where are the boundaries of the home you inhabit? How are you building inner and outer relationships into a home? What kinds of growth does this environment support? Oracle, people in the home. A woman's constancy is fruitful. The old Chinese character for home shows a pig under a roof. A home is where people rear a pig together, sharing wealth, work, and value. People in the home cooperate in their shared space and invest in it together, as in a family, workplace, school of thought, or culture. And within the structure it provides, they can recognize and understand what is valuable. To create a successful home, you need to have the constancy of a woman. Steadily, over time, your work creates a space in which all can grow freely into their natural form and find their place and their connections with others. You allow space for new things to enter and grow, becoming part of the whole inner ecosystem. You keep the space for living in. Image. Wind comes forth originally from fire. People in the home. A noble one's words have substance and her actions are consistent. A strong fire in the hearth will create its own drought. The light and warmth at the center of the home translating into far-reaching influence in the world. It represents a constant, living awareness that pervades the structure and makes its presence felt in everything the noble one says and does. Also, the fire needs a free flow of air to burn cleanly and steadily. Real words and consistent actions keep it alight. Sequence. People in the home follows from hexagram 36, brightness hidden. Injury on the outside naturally means turning back towards the home, and so people in the home follows. The home is a refuge. Inner light that had to be hidden away from the outside world is secure here and finds expression. When you are unappreciated or unseen, you turn back and connect with like-minded people. Pair. People in the home forms a pair with hexagram 38, opposing. Opposing means outside. People in the home means inside. These two hexagrams describe a single landscape. Every inside must have its outside. Inside, you find your fellows, those who share your vision. Outside are the foreigners who see differently and do not belong in this home. Next, we will look at Venabelle Wen's I Ching The Oracle, an updated translation annotated with cultural and historical references, restoring the I Ching to its shamanic origins. Pick yourself up a copy. Wish I had started with this one, and Hilary Barrett, and I-ming. All right, 37, our primary hexagram. If I shake this table too much, this giant Shiva lingam wants to fucking fall off of it and smash everything into oblivion. So try not to shake the table too much. This has fallen down twice already in 2 different readings. And the first time it broke my obsidian mirror, my scrying mirror that I set right there. Gone now. Fucking obliterated. Into dust. Shiva fell on it. All right, hexagram 37. Jia Ren, or the family, the oracle. Do not resist dependence on others, but be so independent that others depend on you. When there is interdependence, then there will be great success. You know what? Why don't we go through all these since we did it this way? I was thinking about doing the secret hexagram right after, or apparently I wasn't since I didn't do it that way, but originally. But we'll just hit the secret hexagram up at the end. Anywho, where the hell was I? I'll start over. Do not resist dependence on others, but be so independent that others depend on you. When there is interdependence, then there will be great success. Nurture your familial bonds. First, loyalty to the clan. Leave no housekeeping unattended. With them, you are strengthened and supported. With you, they are anchored and united. Wind from within, fire emanates outward, synergy for movement forward. This is the clan, the family, interdependence, the Clan MacLeod. Right? The anime version of Highlander was kick-ass. There's like reincarnation, and this couple keep on reincarnating together and finding each other. It's a beautiful story, but also very violent. But it's incredible. And it goes into the future and shit. It's interesting. Anyway. The sage's words hold enduring power. Prosperity pivots upon the woman. Traditionalists interpret hexagram 37 as a particularly auspicious divinatory result for women. Thus, in readings for a man, the oracle counsels the man to follow the woman in the matter at hand. Her direction is auspicious and bodes well for your own endeavors. Confucianists interpret the hexagram as moral instruction on a woman's place and influence in the family. Women hold the clan together. There's an analogy and connection made between the role of women in the clan and words in society. Both are powerful, influential forces in the shaping of a civilization's humaneness. At the heart of hexagram 37 is the political philosophy that the strength and power of a nation pivots upon the social and economic status of its society's women. Table. All right. Next. Let's go straight into the alchemy before we get all heady. With James DeCorn. We'll go into Liu I-ming's Taoist teaching next. He wrote this in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's quite alchemical in nature. Also, pick yourself up a copy of this. This is the bee's knees. In fact, their very knees. 37, people in the home. For people in the home, it is beneficial that the women be chaste. Explanation. People in the home means there are people in the home. This is the path of governing the inner. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is wind, entering, and below is fire, luminous. When illumined, one can follow the Tao, and by following it, one can gradually develop the illumination. Receptivity and understanding are necessary to each other, like wind blowing fire so that fire grows from the wind. Here is a way to govern the home, so it is called people in the home. This hexagram represents refining the self, mastering the mind, turning the attention around to gaze inward. It follows on the previous hexagram, advance. That was a meditation technique. And it's bringing your attention into you instead of it going out. And imagine, to my understanding, it's like bringing it into like a central point within yourself. And it feels intense just doing it at all. So I imagine it works pretty well. Look it up. Look it up. Turning the light around, I think is what it's called. Anyway. Mastering the mind, turning the attention around to gaze inward. It follows on the previous hexagram advance. In advance, illumination grows from receptivity. It is the work of advancing the fire and employing illumination. To advance the fire and employ illumination, it is necessary to first illumine the inner. Illumination of the inner is refining the self. Refining the self simply means refining the yin within oneself. What yin is this? It is the human mentality. In the human body, the vitality, spirit, soul, psyche, and intent all belong to yin and all take orders from the human mentality. When the human mind is calm, they are all calm. And when the human mind is agitated, they all are agitated. Refining the self simply means refining away this human mind. When you refine away the human mind, the mind of Tao spontaneously becomes manifest. When the mind of Tao becomes manifest, the mind is illumined. When the vitality, spirit, soul, psyche, and intent all transform into guardian spirits of truth. So I speak a lot about the bicameral mind. If this is your first time hearing it from me, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but the idea is how people think differently in terms of their left and right hemispheres of their brain. And Julian Jaynes came up with this theory that we largely, back in the day when people had visions all the time, not to say that they don't now, but more frequently, in fact, that was the only way that their right hemisphere spoke to their left, was through almost like dreamlike visions. And that's how they decided how to act, is almost by intuition, through like a guiding God type of thing. And now we've swung so far into the left hemisphere, and they operate differently. One is very numinous and liminal, and like that sleep state, or that numinous, can't remember what it's called when you're in between sleep and awake. That is the zone of the right in this theory, how it goes, and then the left would be more calculated and basically needs words, for instance. And if you think about how dreams, they don't always make sense, it's because there's something that's happening with that hemisphere that the left, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Is that what that stupid old school book was called? But that's like the idea, almost like one side is more masculine and rational, if you want to say it that way, and intellectual, and needs to divide things up and take things apart and put them back together and that kind of shit. And the other one is like this, the high priestess card or something in the tarot. But here, what I imagine is going on when you look at this through the light of that bicameral mind theory could be that you're bridging those two hemispheres, and you're allowing for a portal between them, or a tunnel, a wind tunnel of sorts, in order for more of that numinous to come through. Doesn't mean you have to go slippy down the hill, you know what I mean? But yeah, it would be good if there was a better balance and the ability for us to operate from either one, more fluidly. and dynamically. Yeah. When the mind of Tao becomes manifest, the mind is illumined. Then the vitality, spirit, soul, psyche, and intent all transform into guardian spirits of truth. The human body is like a home. The human vitality, spirit, soul, psyche, and intent are like the people in a home. When you refine the human mind and produce the mind of Tao, the vitality, spirit, soul, psyche, and intent, each rests in its own position, and each discharges its own affairs. Joy, anger, sadness, and happiness are all harmonious and balanced, like a family being orderly. This is represented as the benefit in women being chaste. Women consider preservation of chastity valuable. Refining the self is like a woman preserving her chastity and not getting engaged. Then the true yin within oneself will become manifest. When the true yin is manifest, the open awareness of the mind is unobscured, and outside things cannot get in. Thereby, one can gradually progress in an orderly manner to seek the yang of the other to the benefit of all. In the body of the hexagram, the second line is empty, below, while the fifth is solid above. When one empties the mind, one can thereby fill the belly. That also is a reference to my understanding of it, of energy manipulation technique or flowing, qi or jin through your body from the upper dantian to the lower dantian, which is just below the navel-ish area. When one empties the mind, one can thereby fill the belly. I think that's a safer place to store energy, and if you're cultivating energy, if you can figure out a way to get it to go down. I'm actually I set it here because it's on topic of what we're reading, but I'm very excited to look further into this book on Taoist alchemy. I set it there, I set it over here. Here it is. Come on, Bessie. Show yourself. Okay, this is just the first volume. I was considering reading this, but just pick yourself up a copy. This guy breaks down secret from the lineage holder of the Dragon Gate method of Taoist alchemy. He basically gave this guy the go-ahead to divulge all of it, and he was in a position where several people taught him from a child. I think it was like 10 years old, where he basically just grinded and learned all these Taoist alchemical techniques. And then he met this guy that wrote the book and basically divulged everything to him and wanted him to be able to write multiple volumes and get it, released. It used to be something that you could only hear by word of mouth, and they would keep it from you unless, you were a select few. And so the fact that a book like that is out is incredible to me. And can't wait to cultivate some energy on like a Taoist alchemical level, or at least understand from that perspective of it. Gone far afield. Yep. Yes. Okay. When one empties the mind, one can thereby fill the belly. The benefit for female chastity is precisely that whereby one affects emptiness and preserves calm as a strategy to establish the home and business. Therefore, practitioners of the Tao are cautious and wary, and do not let any yin energy reside in the heart, even subconsciously. Next, we'll look at the commentary section on Hexagram 37, members of a family. Wind above, fire below. Wind emerges from fire, members of a family. Thus is there factuality in the speech of superior people, consistency in their deeds. Members of a family means the people of one family. Above is wind, below is fire. So fire is inside and wind is outside. Wind emerges from fire. When fire burns, wind spontaneously arises. Wind and fire are the same family. This is the image of members of a family. What superior people see in this is that just as wind and fire are in the same place, wind rising from fire, similarly, others and oneself live together. And so what one can do for others is based on oneself. If one is upright oneself, others will naturally be influenced. Therefore, when superior people speak, they do not speak in vain. There must be something factual for them to speak about. When they act, they do not do so at random. There must be something consistent about their deeds. When one is careful about one's words and prudent in one's acts, those with whom one lives will also be factual in speech and consistent in deeds, and be members of a family with oneself. Members of a family does not only mean people of the same house. It means all those among whom one lives and with whom one works. When there is factuality in speech, words being based on actualities, then there is a point. There's evidence that speech will accord with reason. When there is consistency in deeds, action having a conclusion, then there is true practice and genuine application. Those deeds will accomplish something. When one speaks factually and acts consistently, without flaw in word or deed, inwardly not losing oneself, outwardly not hurting others, then those with whom one lives and works will be influenced without anything being said, just as wind spontaneously rises when fire burns. Words are the voice of the mind, deeds are the tune of the body. If practitioners of the Tao speak with factuality and act with consistency, then the mind will be upright and the body will be disciplined. Nature and life will have a dwelling place. Furthermore, they will be in confluence with heaven above and earth below, and will be members of a family with heaven and earth. It's early morning. The birds chirping outside. No one is awake. I'm back at my cliff. Bjork. Still throwing things off. Imagine what my body would sound like slamming against those rocks. And when it lands, will my eyes be closed or open? 37, The Family. James DeCorn, Gnostic Book of Changes. I've left links to it in the description box below. Pop over there sometime. He synthesizes several I Ching commentaries into one helpful place and then sums them up in his words in the end. And it's very helpful, albeit it's like reading a bunch of dictionary entries for a little bit. So, patience, young Padawan. 37, The Family, hexagram number 37. He also is a practitioner of the Tao, and he quotes people like Carl Jung and things like the Kabbalah. Hexagram number 37, Family. Other titles: family life, clan, home, linkage, dwelling people, the psyche. A quote from D.F. Hook: may indicate a situation where the family can and should help. Judgment, leg. For the regulation of the family, what is most advantageous is that the wife be firm and correct. Wilhelm / Baines, The Family. The perseverance of the woman furthers. Blowfold, the family, women's persistence brings reward. Lu, the family, a woman's perseverance benefits. Ritsuma/Karcher, dwelling people, harvesting, woman trial. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of living and working with others in a common space. It emphasizes that caring for your relation with those who share this space and for the space itself is the adequate way to handle it. To be in accord with the time, you are told to dwell with people. Sloughnessy, family members, beneficial for the maiden to determine. Cleary 1, for the people in the home, it is beneficial that the woman be chaste. In the human body, the vitality, spirit, soul, psyche, and intent all belong to yin and all take orders from the human mentality. When you refine away the human mind, the mind of Tao spontaneously becomes manifest. We read that in the I-ming. Wu, the family indicates that it is advantageous for a woman to be persevering. This is a hexagram with its emphasis on women. Both constituent trigrams are feminine. Hence, those who endeavor to be firm and correct will have advantages. The image, leg. Wind rising out of fire, the image of the family. The superior man speaks the truth and is consistent in his behavior. Wilhelm/Baines, wind comes forth from fire, the image of the family. Thus, the superior man has substance in his words and duration in his way of life. Blowfold, this hexagram symbolizes wind rising from fire. The superior man's speech is full of substance and he behaves with constancy. Lu, the wind coming out of the fire symbolizes the family. The speech of the superior man should have substance and his conduct be enduring. Wu, wind comes forth from fire. This is the family. Thus, the Chunsi, or chief son or superior person, speaks with facts and acts with perseverance. Commentary, Confucius/Leg. In family, the wife is in her correct place in the lower trigram and the husband in his correct place in the upper. That spouses occupy their correct positions shows the correct relationship between heaven and earth. The parents rule the family. Let the father indeed be father and the son son. Let the elder brother be indeed elder brother and the younger brother younger. Let the husband indeed be husband and the wife wife. Then the family will be in its correct state. Bring the family to that state and all under heaven will be established. Leg. The written Chinese character for family simply means a household or the members of a family. The lesson of the hexagram is the regulation of the family, affected by the cooperation of the husband and wife in their several spheres, and only needing it to become universal to secure the good order of the kingdom. The importance placed accorded to the wife is seen in the short sentence in the judgment. That she be firm and correct and do her part well is essential for the family's proper regulation. The wife is represented by line 2 and the husband is her proper correlate in line 5. The relationship between heaven and earth is analogous to the relationship between husband and wife. The second sentence of the Confucian commentary, more closely rendered, would be that in the family there is an authoritative ruler is a way of naming father and mother. This means that the assertion of authority in a family should be a correct balance of force and gentleness. Anthony, family symbolizes correct relationships between people. The family unit, spiritual family, the sage and the student, and human groups generally. When these most basic relationships are correct, the world is made correct through the force of inner truth. Through cultivation of the feminine component of our nature, and through persevering in a virtually menial position from our ego's viewpoint, so that our work can come to fruition. All this means to forego striving and self-assertion, and to allow ourselves to be led, while persevering in gentleness and devotion to our path. Notes and paraphrases, judgment. For the correct regulation of the psyche, what is most important is that the ego must be firm and correct. The superior man lives his allegiance to the ideals of the work. Applying the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, the relationships within a family are analogous to the relationships within a city-state, or a kingdom, and vice versa. A quote from D.H. Smith in Confucius. Society centuries before the time of Confucius had been organized on the basis of family. In the early days of the Zhou dynasty, fiefs had been allotted to the feudal lords in a system of planned colonization. These feudal lords, linked to one another and to the royal house by marriage ties, took their families, retainers, peasants, artisans, and soldiers to form self-sufficient colonies based on an agricultural economy and governed from well-fortified walled cities. These large family groupings of the nobility were preserved only so long as the relationships of parents to children, brothers to brothers, and masters to servants were effectively controlled. If the ideal city is like a family, then the analogy also holds for an individual. Here, the comparison goes directly from city to psyche, and this is a quote from Plato in The Republic. Have we any greater evil for a city than what splits it and makes it many instead of one? Or a greater good than what binds it together and makes it one? Then is that city best governed which is most like a single human being? Psychologically interpreted, the hexagram of the family symbolizes the psyche, and the Confucian commentary tells us that when its inner components all assume their proper roles and functions, then the work will come into fruition. All under heaven will be established. The identical idea has been stated in Gnostic thought. A quote from the Gnostic Gospel according to Thomas. Jesus said to them, "When you make eyes in the place of an eye, and a hand in the place of a hand, and a foot in the place of a foot, and an image in the place of an image, then shall you enter the kingdom." The husband is the analog of heaven or the self, capital self, and the wife is the analog of the earth or the ego. When the ego assumes its correct role as the magnetic servant of the work, then inner transformations can take place. I have paraphrased the judgment in terms of the necessity of the ego to follow the dictates of the work. The dictates of the work. But one could alternately phrase it in terms of keeping emotional responses under control. For the wife to be firm and correct is to ensure that emotions, drives, and appetites are not allowed to make decisions. They are servants, not masters. This is the essence of the work, and arguably the most reiterated idea in the I Ching. A quote from R. Osceola in Psychosynthesis. The patient should be encouraged to use his mind through observation and discrimination to bring clearly into his awareness the irrational aspect of his drives and emotions, and also the possible drawbacks and harmfulness to himself and others of their uncontrolled manifestation. To act on the spur of an impulse, a drive, or an intense emotion can very often produce undesirable effects which one afterwards regrets. Therefore, he should learn, by repeated experiment and effort, to insert between impulse and action a stage of reflection, of mental consideration of a situation, and of critical analysis of his impulse, trying to realize its origin, its source. The 37th hexagram teaches us that the way to manage the emotions is no different than the proper management of a family. No wise parent can teach a child self-discipline by adopting the child's point of view. Permissiveness, either with our children or our own primitive drives and passions, is a sure formula for disintegration. The work demands that the ego hold the line on this issue. Indeed, it is the ego's only legitimate function. Quote from R. Osceola in Psychosynthesis. We are dominated by everything with which our ego becomes identified. We can dominate and control everything from which we disidentify ourselves. Next, we'll read from Browne Walker's I Ching, or Book of Changes, A Guide to Life's Turning Points. Hexagram 37, he calls peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly time, peanut butter jelly. No, he calls it Chia, Gen, the family, or the clan. A healthy family, a healthy country, a healthy world, all grow outward from a single superior person. The hexagram Chia Gen concerns the proper foundation of human communities. The I Ching teaches that all clans must have a superior person at their center if they are to prosper and succeed. Therefore, in order to improve our family, company, nation, or world community, we must begin by improving ourselves. If you will observe healthy families, you will always see present in them three qualities: love, faithfulness, and correctness. When we truly love others, we are naturally kind, gentle, and patient with them. When we are faithful to others, we place proper principles and conduct above temporary influences like anger, desire, or greed. And when we practice correctness, we spiritually nourish ourselves and all those around us. When all three qualities are cultivated, a healthy clan springs naturally into being. The difference between paying lip service to these ideals and practicing them is profound. If you advocate high ideals and actions to others but do not embody them yourself, your influence will disintegrate for lack of a proper foundation. Therefore, in order to inspire superior qualities in others, you must first instill them in yourself. I'm looking at the man in the mirror. You know what I mean? It's exactly that. When modesty, acceptance, concentrate not upon influencing others or external events, but upon strengthening your inner devotion to proper principles. When modesty, acceptance, equanimity, and gentleness become deeply ingrained in your character, they will flow steadily outward from you. Soon, you will find yourself enmeshed in a web of healthy relationships, and in this, there is great good fortune. Amen to that. It's got a nice wobble to it. All right. Where are we at here? I think we got through everybody. Yeah, we very much did. Oh, it's just because there's only one hexagram. So then next we will read our secret hexagram, and we will read it starting with Hilary Barrett, I think. Yeah. 64, and this is the hidden influence behind the situation. Hexagram 64, not yet a cross. Key questions: how to prepare for the crossing? How will you know when it's time? Thoughts? Thinking about it. Oracle, not yet a cross, creating success. The small fox, almost a cross, soaks its tail, no direction bears fruit. Here at the very end of the I Ching, nothing is settled or complete. Everything is in flux. A wise fox will only attempt to cross when there is solid ice on the river, and then pick his way over carefully, every sense alert. If he sets out when the conditions are not right, he won't be able to complete the crossing. He'll be shamed and stranded at best, and he may be altogether sunk. For a small fox on drifting ice in midstream, there is no useful direction. When you are not yet across, you may be hesitating on the verge of a transition, trying to tell whether it's safe to commit yourself. It's time to use the skills of a wise fox. Image. Fire dwells above stream, not yet across. A noble one carefully differentiates between beings, so each finds its place. There is fire and there is water, the right elements to cook with, but in the wrong places relative to one another. The next task is to find better places for things so they can work together coherently. A noble one uses the qualities of fire above and stream below, a careful, respectful awareness of the undercurrents, like the acute eyes and ears of the fox attuned to the river's flow beneath the ice. She will develop her understanding of how the different elements and processes in a complex situation fit together, and find ways for people to relate more harmoniously. Sequence. Not yet across follows from hexagram 63, already across. Things cannot be finished, and so not yet across follows, and so the completion. While there's life, there is change, and no transition can be the end. Everything is in place, and then nothing is in place. You arrive, yet you have barely begun. All that completes is the cycle itself. Okay, next Benabel win. All right. I mean, we might even just read them all. It'll end up with a better grasp on the entire thing. And you're always free to skip my yapping. There's timestamps. So if you have a favorite I Ching commentary you'd like to go to, why don't you do so? Hexagram 64, Weiji, or YG, W-E-I-J-I, toward an end. The Oracle. What is to be has not yet come to pass, but as you ford the river, you see the banks on the other side. You are about to peak in the situation at hand, but know that after every peak, there comes a time of stagnation and then an inevitable decline. No one is above regulation. There is an order that every one of us must follow, a higher authority that each one of us must submit to. When you forget that, then that is the start of the decline. Remember, reaching the top is only the halfway point. Fire above water, one repels the other. Incompatible principles. Fire moves upward, water moves downward. It is not yet time for ferrying relief across the river, reaching toward an end at the point of climax. You are about to ford the great stream, but what is to be has not yet come to pass. There is prosperity to be had, and from where you stand, you can gauge how much farther you must go to attain that prosperity. The sage exercises caution in determining a proper order and must understand the power of the four cardinal directions. You are about to peak in the situation at hand, but know that after every peak, there comes a time of stagnation and then an inevitable decline. Remember, reaching the top is only the halfway point. There will be a favorable outcome. A little fox wades across the stream. It is close to reaching the shore. The fox's tail gets wet. There is one last obstacle to overcome before you reach the top. And then after you reach the top, there is still the descent to be concerned about. Such is the cycle of changes that we are all subjected to. No easy gains. Hexagram 64, the hexagram of change. It makes me think of the Wheel of Fortune card in the tarot. Hexagram 64 reaffirms the overarching theme of the Book of Changes, and that is change. The final hexagram is not about completion, it is about incompletion. The end is only a beginning. There is no end. The hexagram expresses a period of transition from the peak of a situation to a time of standstill after that peak, to the time right before the inevitable decline. Considering chronology and timing, you would assume that the final hexagram in the revelation would be one of completion, but the theme of conclusions is found in hexagram 63, not 64. Hexagram 63 was about closing and what comes after a closing. Here, hexagram 64 is about the last mile before arriving at a finish line. In hexagram 64, you are close to achieving the goal, but not quite there yet. Nevertheless, it is generally considered an auspicious hexagram in divination because it indicates that only small, reasonable efforts are needed to achieve great success and final accomplishment of what you seek to attain. All right, let's see I-ming here next. Anybody we skip, it might be bouncing really rapidly through James DeCorn's Gnostic Book of Changes, because I'd love to know what Browne Walker thinks of it. Turn to page 222. Pew, pew, pew. All right, where are we at here? 64, Unsettled. Being as yet unsettled. Again, this is the hidden influence behind the situation, the secret hexagram. I'm gonna burn another Hanuman incense here. It's just a bummer when we run out. I'm super bummed out about it. Jesus. Get in there. That's why I got all these jokes, right? Hanuman incense. Wasn't he a prankster or something like that? Prankster, son of a bitch. All right. Unsettled. Being as yet unsettled is developmental. A small fox, having nearly crossed the river, gets its tail wet, does not succeed. Explanation. Unsettled means yin and yang are not yet settled. As to the qualities of the hexagram, below is water, a pitfall, and above is fire, bright. Bright on the outside while dark on the inside, causing downfall by brightness, producing brightness because of danger. Yin and yang are awry and do not correspond, so it is called unsettled. This hexagram represents refining the self and repelling yin, waiting for the appropriate time with suppressed yang. It follows on the previous hexagram, predominance of the small. In predominance of the small, activity and stillness are as one. By smallness, yin, one cultivates the path of non-striving. This is done after yin and yang complete and settle each other. Before they are settled, however, it is first necessary to reach all the yins that trap yang. Only after that does true yin manifest and true yang return. So yin and yang balance each other and the gold elixir crystallizes. This is why the work that involves striving, refining the self, and waiting for the time is important. Once people reach the age of 16, heaven and earth commingle. The yang in the middle of heaven enters the palace of earth, so earth is filled and becomes water. The yin in the middle of earth enters the palace of heaven, so heaven is hollowed out and becomes fire. Here's that process. It's changing of the trigrams. This little area here. The yin in fire receives the yang energy of heaven. Yin and yang aggregate and it turns into fire. The yang in water receives the yin energy of earth. Yin and yang steam and it becomes water. This fire and water are growing day and night. Oh, nope. This fire and water are in the temporal mixing of yin and yang, the confusion of real and artificial. Growing day and night. The warm, gentle fire changes into violent, hot fire, and the water of true unity changes into the water of unbridled lust. Once the nature of fire erupts and the discriminatory consciousness takes charge of affairs and the original spirit withdraws, once the nature of water acts, the polluted vitality causes trouble and the original vitality is depleted. At this point, people begin to vie for honor, plunder for profit, contest for victory, and seek power, depriving others to benefit themselves, using intellectual brightness outwardly, indulging in emotions, giving free rein to their desires, deluded by objects of sense, they ravage and abandon themselves. The danger of mundanity being stored within. Bright on the outside but dark on the inside, they bury the real and accept the false. The human mentality looms dangerously. The mind of Tao is now faint. Essence is disturbed. Life is shaken. Yin and yang are out of harmony. The 5 elements injure one another. All sorts of emotions and cravings are in full force. All sorts of schemes and wiles are there. This is why being unsettled is unsettled. However, being unsettled means not yet having reached settlement. It does not mean settlement is not possible, only that the person has not yet sought that settlement. If one seeks settlement, ultimately it will be possible to be settled. This is why there is a developmental aspect to being unsettled. But though there is a way of development in an unsettled state, nevertheless, since the negative energy of acquired conditioning has been operative for so long, and the primordial true positivity is sunken so deeply, settlement cannot be effected immediately. The work of self-refinement is necessary before you can see an effect. Self-refinement means refining the human mind. The human mind is the progenitor of all mundanities. Once the human mind is gone, accumulated mundanities evaporate. Light arises in the empty room, and true celestial energy gradually approaches restoration. But before refinement of the self is perfected, the mind is not empty, and the light is not true. Negativity and mundanity still have not withdrawn completely, and one cannot seek their end in a hurry. If one does not know the firing process and rushes to achieve settlement, this is still the human mentality acting, working with false understanding. Then the unsettled will never be settled. This is like a small fox having nearly crossed the river, gets its tail wet, and does not succeed. A fox is associated with yin, a creature known for its suspiciousness. Though a small fox is not very suspicious, it cannot be entirely free from doubts. As long as the human mentality is not gone, the mind of Tao does not become manifest. This is like the small fox, though nearly settled, before reaching settlement. If the refinement of the self is incomplete when settlement is nearly reached, though one wants to go ahead, one instead falls behind. Therefore, practitioners of the Tao in refining the self must reach utter emptiness and tranquility, the yin trapping yang, withdrawing completely, before the primordial yang energy comes from within nothingness, and true yin and true yang unite, able to settle what is unsettled. A classic says, if refinement of the self is imperfect, the restored elixir does not crystallize. So we know refinement of the self is the first step in practicing Tao. Something came up with that for me. Okay, well, we'll read the commentary section on it next. Not yet settled, fire above, water below. Fire is above water, not yet settled. Thus, superior people carefully discern things and keep them in their places. Not yet settled means something has not yet reached settlement. Above is fire. Did I read this section, or was it the other one? Just give me a second. I wouldn't steer you wrong. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Not yet settled, fire above, water below. Fire is above water, not yet settled. Thus, superior people carefully discern things and keep them in their places. Not yet settled means something has not yet reached settlement. Above is fire, below is water. The fire is above water. When fire is above water, the fire cannot heat the water, and the water cannot control the fire. Water and fire in separate places is the image of being not yet settled. What superior people see in this is that once people get mixed up in temporal conditioning, the real is obscured and the artificial comes forth. Body and mind are unstable, Vitality and spirit are clouded. Volatility erupts and greed arises. Taking misery for pleasure, they go to any lengths and become extremely unsettled. Before I finished reading this, something came to mind of that bicameral mind theory idea, is that sounded weird. I just jumbled a bunch of stuff out. If you imagine the connectivity of the right hemisphere, it talked about the yin and women being the focus of our primary hexagram 37, people in the home, that the women hold a home together. It's almost like, similarly, that right hemisphere is the part of us that bridges, maybe is even, you might call it the psychic or quantumly connected part of us, potentially, that is connected more so to the collective unconscious. So if that's the case, then if you imagine a whole group of beings of any sort, imagine humans, for instance. Let's take and assume these humans develop a state of consciousness where they slip from one end of the pendulum to the other in some way over, a period of time. But they make a transition, and all of a sudden now they're off kilter balance to the left hemisphere extreme. That could be conceptualized as being kicked out of Eden, right? If you have an understanding of God and you have this immediate connection with the divine or whatever our thoughts and impulses spring from, and all of a sudden now you don't have access to that anymore in the same way, and you have to go to oracles and things like that, the Oracle of Delphi, and for people to be able to have that. Before, if they had that all the time, everybody, maybe they're a little bit more pack animal-y, and it'd be easy to have like a cult situation happen, and it'd be bad if they're following the wrong, king or leader or whomever. But if you have that perfect balance, maybe leaning a little side, more so to the right side of things, then I imagine we could walk by intuition a lot easier and not fight against what reality is doing. The part of us that gets scared is like the little ego self that needs to vie for power and honor and all this kind of stuff like it's talking about, and turns everything into a battle because all it can do is divide. It needs to set itself apart. And it's oftentimes that I hear a lot on YouTube, the idea of this is why you're special, whereas the right hemisphere is more of like, this is why specialness is unnecessary. You know what I mean? It's not unnecessary, it still exists, but you don't have to like be told it. Do you know what I mean? It's not something you have to believe. This is how consciousness is displaying itself through this appendage, if you will. And if we just don't fight that and remember that it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to, fall into this oblivion and never to return. In one of the readings recently, I think it was even the last one or the one before, it was talking about the self rewarding the ego. And maybe that's kind of like flowing into this a little bit, is that's what that is. If you can have that trust between you and your oversoul, maybe you could even put it that way, or picture it as just like the self, or just reality projecting all of this. It can have your particular face and flavor to it that you're used to. You don't have to change religions or any of that stuff. You literally can pick a point or just maybe if you had some experience where you feel like what has guided you in the past through your intuition, if that has a face to it, great. But just know that all of those are wrong. No one face to what is behind all of this is going to really cut it. It's not anything that anyone from one appendage perspective is going to be able to encapsulate in their left hemisphere. And the right hemisphere is not even necessarily about trying to. And so that's the way we need to handle this. I was talking in a collaboration video that I was watching recently that I did with someone. Which one was that? Doesn't matter at this point. If I think of it, then I'll say. But what it was is something about religions. I know in one of those I said that we don't need to be like-minded, because the mind that you're talking about when you say that is the left hemisphere. It's never going to be able to be like-minded enough. You get enough people in a room, and they'll start talking about some other people that aren't in the room, right? There's always a desire for that part of us, that ego part of us, to set itself apart in some way. It needs to have a connection to the right side in that kind of like way where it does make the ego feel special, and it is maybe sometimes something that it has to bridge in whatever way that's necessary. But if you can understand kind of how the different hemispheres work, I think it makes it a little easier. That's what it was. I was in a church group that wanted to stick together, and they were using 1 Corinthians 10, 2 through 4, or something like that. I can't remember what, but Paul says that they all agree, and there be no divisions among them, but they be of the same mind and the same spirit, or something like that. So long story short is they thought that meant that, and I did at the time, that intellectually with your left hemisphere, you have to 100% agree with everything to be like-minded, right? But later Paul talks about that if your brother, if eating meat causes a stumbling block for your brother, don't do it. But it didn't matter. So obviously there were certain things that you could agree on and others that you didn't have to if you're talking about that left hemisphere side of things. But the unifying factor that he kept talking about throughout everything was love. So anyway, and that is what unifies. But if you think about it in that way, that's the connecting part of that right hemisphere, or the yin principle of the woman in the home, of people in the home of hexagram 37. That right hemisphere, right? You got to leave that to the guiding principle. It even said that the woman was to take the lead in this. So if you want to break that down into the psyche, you could just say, in each one of us, there needs to be a little bit more leading going on from the right hemisphere as opposed to the left, because as we're seeing in this Unsettled, which is the secret hidden influence behind the situation, is that things may seem like everything's clicking together, but if we're trying to compare apples to apples as far as beliefs or anything, looks, anything that has to do with the ego of how each person differentiates themselves from each other group. That is never going to be a thing that can unify, because it inherently, its objective is to chop things up. And that's, if you leave it to its function long enough, it'll chop up every little thought into other thoughts for eternity. And that's, you can just let it do that. But if that's how you want to live your life, is just constantly being in mental loops and, you know, comparing everybody and all of that kind of shit, go for it. But that's a way to be stuck in a side of the brain that I think that we're developing not out of. We're going to take everything that's valuable from that space, but we need to lean on that yin principle, that woman pulling the home together to create people in the home. There has to be that hearth space. It has to be empty. There has to be wind being able to flow through with that alchemical process. It was talking about the wind for that furnace to work properly. When fire is above water, the fire cannot heat the water, and the water cannot control the fire. Water and fire in separate places is the image of being not yet settled. What superior people see in this is that once people get mixed up in temporal conditioning, the real is obscured and the artificial comes forth. Body and mind are unstable, vitality and spirit are clouded, volatility erupts and greed arises. Taking misery for pleasure, they go to any lengths and become extremely unsettled. Nevertheless, sages have a way of restoring the primordial within the temporal. It is just that people have never thought of this settlement. If they wanted this settlement, they would be capable of settlement. Therefore, superior people carefully discern things and keep them in their places. The problem, I think, largely is we have a fear of being too much in that space, because to us it represents, you know, darkness and what could be crawling out of it. The other thing too is we're so ensconced in left hemisphere thinking, especially if you're coming from the West, that we don't even see past it. It's like you're confined in a matrix of language that, yes, it's helpful to communicate on a level, but also, I mean, that's a way to never be able to let go of language. Like it talks about, once you cross the stream, the boat's no longer necessary. Once you get to what you're climbing up to, the ladder's no longer necessary. And if you're talking about using language to even describe this, it's like the finger pointing at the moon, where you're not going to be able to encapsulate what the moon is with the finger, even if you're pointing at it, right? It's not even that point. It's like, look beyond that. It's beyond the graspability that a word will allow you to get your little talons around and hold and, you know, feed to your babies or what have you, keep sacred, spread around, that we're all going to say, now this is the thing that needs to be done. It's not like that. It's not that simple. It clearly is a situation where, if, like Hilary Barrett talked about, if the world's to be changed, or Browne Walker from our primary hexagram, or just regular hexagram 37, he was saying that the only way to affect change is to change oneself. And to do that, it doesn't mean getting into that left hemisphere and having battles between willpower and ego shit. I think it has a lot more to do with surrender of that and the ability to, over time, and I think meditation helps with this. I'll say it again, it was in the collaboration I did with Core of Black Raven Meditation. What helped me open up that space was largely a combination of meditation, occasional mushroom use, and the use of the I Ching on a fairly consistent basis. And I was able to map out my subconscious to a degree where, I don't understand how it works. You know what I mean? But I've programmed it in there enough, especially in liminal space points where this is like, 4 or 5 in the morning now. Usually when I do this, I'm up and go in and start doing the reading sometime around 3 a.m. But I'm like meditating and getting into my groove, trying to open up that space where what I'm doing intellectually is kind of a bridge through into that subconscious space. And I can feel kind of how intuition is developing an ability to have, when it comes into the conscious space, me to be able to recognize it as for what it is. I read in a book, it said something about, it's never the loudest, and it's always the first thing you hear. But it's quiet and it's faint, right? And usually you'll second guess yourself if it's the right thing. That's the intuition thing that's coming through. Another way to look at it was Jung talked about in all these cultures, I believe it was Jung, that what was right and wrong changed from culture to culture. And even in the same culture, you would have a fairy tale say how this person gets through the situation by not trusting. And in another situation, it's the exact opposite. They fail because they do trust. That kind of an example. He said that in all of those, the one thing that if they broke this one thing, they always failed was their relationship with the helpful animal. And the imagery has to do with that right hemisphere, that idea. Carl Jung nurtured a connection to being that he had a name for. I can't recall what it was, but it taught him a lot of stuff, having a connection to that space where he had a face for it and a name, and it was familiar to him. And that's how he developed an ongoing partnership, if you will. And, people talk about their guides and all of the kind of things. I think what's helpful is to be open and Carl Jung used the I Ching daily, from what I understand, for quite some time. And then over time, when he felt like he had programmed his subconscious enough and was recognizing how he was developing his intuition, he got to the point where later on in his life, he didn't need to do it anymore. He felt like he had built his intuition honed enough that it was like that breezeway was nice and clear and open. Shamanism, the idea of being a hollow reed. It's like that our egos are not meant to protect us into a life of misery because nothing makes us happy, because we've missed the point and we feel disconnected. The more wealth you have, oftentimes you find out that you can have anything you want, but those things start getting boring and you need to, have something to strive for. So if you think about, people think, billionaires being the issue, well, they're also a part of consciousness. And if you think of it more as terms of where consciousness is focused and how it's focused in a way where it's highly emphasizing the ego, then you're going to get that kind of thing. That's just a product of that leaning and that intention and that rewarding of a particular advancement. And it does bring, advantages, but obviously when it becomes something that's actually more threatening to the sustainability and the ecosystem, all of that, then obviously there needs to be a counterbalance that takes place. And if we can understand it so simply on terms of just a bridge between the two hemispheres of your brain, you can completely take out any equation of even spiritualism. You don't even have to believe in spiritualism or spirits or entities or gods or religions or any of that. It could literally be as simple as a product of how our brain is wired, that we have all of these religions and all of these ways of describing how to create harmony between us and the divine. If we're kind of like little Wi-Fi routers or, I don't know, radio antennas, then you could maybe picture like the ability for them to all communicate and everything. But really, if they're not tuned in to what the source is, whatever that is, and where that's coming from, bridging them all together and making them a coherent unit, that or whatever, this is all, one cosmic organism or Shiva Shakti dance or whatever you want to call it, right? If you want to think in terms of the Bible, Paul said, in him we live and move and exist and have our being. And to me, that would indicate that this is all that. This is that. So no matter where you're coming from, if you strip away any necessity to overcommit to a particular image or push away someone else's image, it doesn't have to be any of that. It can be as simple as right and left hemispheres, and you're bridging the gap between those, and whatever works for you to do that, be careful and all of that. We have fears in the ego side of us of what that might mean for our sanity and all of that kind of stuff. And, just concerns based on maybe religious fears growing up, like demons and that kind of thing, or, what might be an entity that could harm you and all of that kind of stuff. I don't doubt that there's harmful energy and that kind of thing out there that is incoherent or more close to tearing apart than keeping in balance. But if you picture like a fractal, then if you're at all good with imagination and maybe going on kind of a visual journey, could picture things in a harmonizing, blending way where you're in part of the fractal that's a harmonious part of the fractal, for instance. The point isn't any of that as much as it is finding a way for you to bridge your left and right hemispheres together so that that synergy can be created, and we can kind of pivot. You know what I mean? It's an internal pivot, but if everybody internal pivots when the time is ripe in astrology and all of that stuff at the right time, it doesn't need to even be, centering around any individual. Like it was talking about, Browne Walker talked about around the superior person. It's around the superior person in each one of us. That's where we need to be huddled around. And that is what brings it out into society. It's something that you nurture, and it can be a development. And through YouTube, you can connect to each other's energies and have it be like a quantumly entangled web of subconscious, fruit blossoming, right? Out of this subconscious, where all of a sudden now what's growing from us is no longer division. What's growing is what is already there, but in our overindulgence in the left hemisphere and our fear of the right, we'll take down the whole planet before we go there, right? It's everybody else's thing. You point at everyone else, but if you can learn that what the sage does ideally is takes everything internally and alchemizes it and uses it for their advancement. And so it isn't about pointing fingers or blaming. It's about transformation. The only person you have the ability to transform honestly is yourself. And so if we start there, then that's really the only thing we can do anyway. Why the fuck not? You know what I mean? It's worth it. I would like to live, here peacefully with y'all. And by y'all, what's that song? Y'all means y'all. Fucking y'all. All right. Soapbox time. Nevertheless, sages have a way of restoring the primordial within the temporal. It is just that people have never thought of this settlement. If they wanted this settlement, they would be capable of settlement. Therefore, superior people carefully discern things and keep them in their places. Things here means the primordial and the temporal, the real and false, earthly and celestial. Place means where these things abide. Carefully discerning whether things are real or false, it is necessary to be perfectly clear in mind, with genuine knowledge and perception, free from any doubt or confusion whatsoever. This is the work of investigating things to produce knowledge. In respect to the reality or falsehood of things, keeping them in their places so that the real is recognized as real and the false is recognized as false, and the two are not mixed up, is the science of rectifying the mind and making the intent sincere. When one discerns things and understands truth and also keeps things in their place and does not act recklessly, the mundane and the celestial are not mixed up, the real and the false are distinguished. Then there is settlement in the midst of the unsettled. This is like water conveying moisture and fire conveying heat, each accomplishing what it can accomplish, each on a separate path. The primordial is that whereby the real body is made. The temporal is that whereby the phantasmic body is made. Before the primordial and the temporal are settled, the mundane and the celestial are mixed up. The real and the false are confused. If one can distinguish the real from the false, one will know the places of the primordial and the temporal. The temporal has its place in the temporal, which is clearly obvious. One should not mistake something temporal for something primordial and forcibly seek settlement. I'm hearing clicking in my head, and so it's reminding me. For me, something that really blasted that open was a ritual I performed where I had been doing a lot of that meditation and in combination with I Ching and mushroom use. And I had building pressure up in my eyeballs, and it had been there for gradually growing for at least a week or so. And I performed this ritual, and for whatever reason, it was like a permission slip of sorts for me to give up guilt or sense of shame, that kind of thing. And it basically popped in my head, and the fucking energy went up and everything like that, and then it floated out. But if you're having issues, I would recommend checking out Igor Kufiyev's new book. I do a reading on it. I'll leave it in the description box below, but it's on Kundalini, and he would probably be the person to talk to about that. One should not mistake something temporal for something primordial and forcibly seek settlement. So here, them talking about back and forth between the real mind and the human mind or the human mentality. That's what I mean. I feel like there might be a breaking out, kind of a popping from one to the other that occurs. And it could be, a buildup of energy and all of that stuff. So I want you to think about it in those terms as well. Is that maybe that's part of how that is able to flow a little bit better. Like maybe we're so compartmentalized that it's actually, that's what it is. Them talking about you have to completely eliminate the human mind to get to the mind of Tao, for it to be quiet and all that. But that might be almost like the sense of dying, like that idea of like that ego part of you dying. and what's going to happen after this. It's beyond anything that I know. Getting outside of my identification with any perspective at all. It's almost like you have to give up the sense of limited perspective, which, you know, being embodied is a difficult thing to do when you're thinking in terms of the left hemisphere. But with the right, if you can have, if it has to be gradual, a bridge built between those two hemispheres, and you can have trade going back and forth, as it were, you know, you're like giving offerings to the deity, right? You're building up a relationship or whatever, and you're finding out that things are opening up and from that side as well. And there can be that kind of relationship until all of a sudden the person is what did they call it in Christianity? They call it I don't remember, man. It's like illuminated or something like that. But yeah, whatever that is, where you don't really need to rely on words because they hold you back, or ideas. It's kind of like, to be in reality, you kind of just have to be here. You can't project yourself all over the fucking place. You can, but also we're not going to necessarily be able to think logically and rationally our way into a better world. I don't think that's the part of the brain that does that in the first place. Usually the answers it finds are more division. It's like, well, or it leads to another form of division. But that's not the point here. I think we're past all that. And everybody wants to be, but we're all scared because we all have these horrible experiences we've been in with. We've been interrelated with other people. I've been having a lot of that shit come up. I have not had good spaces in my life where it's worked out great for me every time I've been in a group of any kind. So I've gotten myself to just not need groups, maybe even more active than that, of like desiring to avoid them at all costs. So me being here is a weird thing. I was even off social media, been off of, you know, other than YouTube, social media for quite some time now. But yeah, came back because I feel like a pull to, if this has worked this well for me, not only was it able to help me map my subconscious and make me feel like I had a leg to stand on in a world for me that's been very shaky and scary, often involving major upheavals of things that have been well established in my life, groups for a long time, they're just dissolving, including, you know, my religion. I used to be Christian, but I wouldn't consider myself any belief system at this stage. I just, like I said, I feel like the naming of it is not helpful at a certain stage. In one of the Taoist writings, it says that when you reach the stage, whatever it says, words become wrong, or verbalizations, any of that. And so there's not even a need for the finger to be pointing at the moon. The only reason for the finger, this was in that collaboration too, is if somebody needs to see the moon. But if everybody sees the moon already and it's reflecting in all of the rivers at once, there's no need for the finger, right? What happens with words, and you can see this even quicker now with us all being connected through the internet, on the level that we are in this day and age, is that fads change a lot quicker, right? And words that just a while ago were so impactful and meant a lot and were fresh, now, you know, in not a lot of time passing, it's like it becomes oversaturated. And so it loses its meaning, and then it needs to move on again. Well, that's the failure of words in the first place, is that you can't encapsulate something. You can kind of create a sigil of sorts, but the more it's used, the less effect I think that it kind of has, in the sense of you almost take it for granted and you think you know the thing behind the word just because you use your mouth to like shape a certain way, and you grunt out noises, and those noises have kind of like different tones and sounds, and now all of a sudden we know, you know, what this is. That's not a real thing. That is the thing that protects us from being in the real. It's something that the ego needs in order to feel safe. It's like animals that have been in a zoo all their lives in captivity. They take them out and open up the cage to let them out, and they just sit in the cage. That kind of concept. It feels safer to be identified with things. You use them as anchor points. And when they get attacked, you know, you attack. And so it's this constant guarding of my identity and my specialness. And that is not what we need as much of right now. Not to say that that's never necessary, only that the larger perspective and the more real truth going on here is that we're a part of something that is using our bodies as expressive, interactive vehicles in which it can better learn itself, but it also has an inherent trap in it that if you're not careful, that lizard part that needs to protect and needs to divide and logically understand and figure out, you can end up destroying the entire planet you live on and each other, and causing massive loss of life and disharmony and bass-ackwards thinking and all the shit that we're in right now. If you can imagine that happening, and then imagine all it taking is a shift more into the collective unconscious, if you want to call it that, and a blurring into the space where you know, a lot of that ego starts getting dissected and pulled apart and just kind of dissolve, at least to the point where we feel that, hey, we are the ocean. That's really what's happening. We're being animated by something we don't understand. The words carefully discern have a most profound meaning. Discernment requires investigation and penetration of every subtlety, without any carelessness allowed. This is particularly so because the primordial and the temporal are so close that it is easy to mistake them. Only by careful, minute discernment is it possible to recognize truly and know clearly that each has its place. When one knows that each has its place, then one can keep each one in its place. When one can keep each in its place, then the primordial and can be preserved, and the temporal conditioning will not act up. Then the unsettled can be settled, the true earthly and the true celestial conjoin, water and fire commingle, and the spiritual embryo forms. The reasons the sages put the hexagram not yet settled at the end was so that when people are not yet settled, they will investigate the truth and hasten to seek settlement. Well, let's just read Browne Walker. I don't want to get into James the Corn too much. Maybe we will, like a little bit, but maybe not a lot. Oh, it's got 2 hours going. All right. 64. Maybe I'll look at it
just really briefly. I'm super curious. Obviously, what got me to this stage is not eliminating readings. It's only grown. More and more stuff to read. Before completion, I Ching 64. The secret influence behind the situation, fire over water. The transition from chaos to order depends upon your achieving true inner calm. The image of this hexagram is that of spring, a time when the darkness and decay of winter are about to give way to the light and plenty of summer. The transition is not yet complete. Here it depends upon you strengthening your clarity, calm, and conscientiousness. We're actually in the Northern Hemisphere in that transition point, obviously, right now. So that's interesting. I Ching often comes as an indication that we have not yet achieved a genuine inner equanimity. As long as we respond to outer pressures with our egos by worrying, desiring, or becoming aggressive, we cannot attain a successful repose. The I Ching reminds us now to abandon the hysterics of the ego in favor of acceptance, modesty, and inner balance. There was a sage, I think is in Vedic lore, can't remember, but they didn't gain any position when they were awarded their life of, sagehood. And their son, who was a little bit more forceful in his ways and used a lot of the similar principles, but more so in kind of like a advance kind of a way, and maybe even with war, I think. I can't remember I'm so sorry how horrible this is. The main idea is that his son, was awarded a position. But the interesting thing about it was that he basically, in the end, chose to give all of that up, and in the end was freer. So that's kind of a similar way to describe that same kind of concept. To identify with something, even though it seems like you're identifying with bigger and bigger and bigger deities or spaciousness or whatever title you could put to it, really, you got to remember that that's a room you're entering if there's a word attached to it. If it has a word, you get used to that comfortable space, and that's what the word does. It gets you comfortable with a space that you don't have a word for. And if that word is the name of a god, so be it. But it's all pointing to the moon. In fact, the moment points to the moon. It's what reality is constantly doing. The Gorillaz song that I put on my community page, one of them, it said that I gave you lilies, I gave you this, I gave you that, and you basically turned away. Like, you didn't smell them, you didn't do this or that. Jesus. You get my point, but basically, here we are. Reality's happening, and I feel like we're a little bit obsessive over things that will destroy our entire planet if they're not remedied, and a certain balance and harmony be re-established. The time is ripe for those things to take place. Meow. Charles? Not right now, Charles. I'm in the middle of a reading, Charlie. I Ching often comes as an indication that we have not yet achieved a genuine inner equanimity. As long as we respond to outer pressures with our egos by worrying, desiring, or becoming aggressive, we cannot attain a successful repose. The I Ching reminds us now to abandon the hysterics of the ego in favor of acceptance, modesty, and inner balance. That's the other thing, too, is that I don't know if anybody notices anything that I do on the level that I feel it happening in my own life. But a lot of it is symbolic. And so, I'll do these like rituals where I'll do like a polar bear baptism, for instance. that kind of thing. That usually is the culmination of a period of my life that ends in that for a reason. And I'm finding it out as I go. But I'm honoring it. And I'm creating a point in my mind and my subconscious where I stepped over a threshold. This was the last one. Just came from my last dunk. Forgot where I was going with that, but it's an Ankh, and it's got the Jed pillar thing on the bottom too, out of silver. It's really pretty incredible. It's in my beard. Yeah. But I'll have something on me too that'll memorialize it. And then it just becomes a part of my subconscious. So you allow yourself through. And you kind of die to the part of the room that you were in before. And you realize that what these pointers are about is about something that the pointers are eventually not going to be sufficient for anymore if you want further growth. So can't remember if that was the main point of what I was trying to say or not. Good stuff. Ouija denotes a time of great responsibility. In a very real sense, it can be said that the state of the world depends upon your thoughts and conduct now. The external world will only come into order if the inner world has done so. Therefore, seek now to correct whatever in yourself is at odds with the principles of the sage. Quiet your ego, make humility and acceptance your primary goals, and move forward like a fox walking on ice. Cautiously, deliberately, and gently, by persevering in what is true and good, you build the foundation upon which good fortune can come to rest. The other part of it too is that I'm doing this all in front of people, and that I've found has been more and more powerful. In fact, I used to meditate in front of our house, and I recognized that the more people were watching me and thought I was a weirdo. At first I was like a little bit weirded out by it. I'd spin my staff out there and stuff too, and my wands, and meditate, and people would always be walking by at the last place that we lived. But I realized that that's entering collective consciousness, and it actually, the fact that I recognize somebody else recognizing me doing it anchors it even deeper in mine, my access point to it. Might be a better way to describe that. And so that's also another reason I brought this forward, is that I felt that, yeah, I can help me with this, but that has limited effect. If I can get it into, anchored enough into collective unconscious that it actually, in one of the Taoist alchemical writings or poetry that I read from back in the day, I shared on my community page too, it was saying that I always use, to awaken the people, I always use the marrow of the I Ching. And I hadn't heard that in forever until just recently. And I was like, God damn, that's exactly it. That's the idea. It's meant to be something where once you already become enlightened or whatever, it's like how to live in that space. That's what the I Ching is helpful for. It's based on alchemical processes and all of that. It also is written in kind of like a almost mathematical language. So it's pretty cool. When you can simplify things almost to like code, where your body accepts it before your consciousness understands it, it's like that. And having it slip right in and be something that I can navigate with has been incredibly helpful. I highly recommend reorienting your life around something as beneficial to collective consciousness as the I Ching is and has been for me personally. Let's look at James Accord real briefly, just because if if you don't want to, you can always skip anyway with the timestamp. And what the hell, I'm interested. So here we go. Here I go again on my own, going down the only road I've ever known. Like a drifter, I was born to wear cologne. I still don't wear cologne, though. I know the real words. It's Al Capone. That's right. 64, unfinished business. Hexagram, unfinished business. Other titles might be before completion, the symbol of what is not yet past, not yet forwarding, not yet completed, tasks yet to be completed, not yet, yet to be, before the end, mission yet unaccomplished, a state of transition. Leg, unfinished business suggests successful progress, but if the young fox that has nearly crossed the stream gets his tail wet, there will be no advantage. Wilhelm/Baines, before completion, success, but if the little fox, after nearly completing the crossing, gets his tail in the water, there is nothing that would further. Blofeld, before completion, success. Before the little fox has quite completed its crossing of the ice, its tail gets wet. This implies that we are to expect a setback in our plans. No goal or destination is favorable now. Hence, this is a time for waiting and for drawing in our horns. That the last of the 64 hexagrams should be before completion rather than after completion may seem surprising until it is recalled that there is nothing final about it. The cycle of change continues, passing from hexagram 64 onto the first hexagram and so on internally. So because of the ego needing things to stay the same, it's not the best at navigating through change, but that's always what's taking place. So that's another reason the I Ching is so helpful, is it can be something that you can kind of like have along with you going through the changes, so it's more comfortable to do so. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of being on the edge of an important change of situation. It emphasizes that waiting and accumulating energy to begin the upcoming move is the adequate way to handle it. Let's skip right to the commentary section and then go to the notes and paraphrases. Well, let's leave something of this. In the image, Blofeld. This hexagram symbolizes fire above water. The superior man takes care to distinguish between things before arranging them in order. Leg, fire over water, the image of unfinished business. The superior man carefully discriminates among the qualities of things and the different positions they naturally occupy. Ritzmo/Karcher, fire located above stream, not yet fording. A chunsu or chief son or superior person uses considering to mark off the beings residing on all sides. Wu, there is fire above water. This is mission yet unaccomplished. Thus, the chunsi or chief son or superior person makes careful distinction of things and their proper places of being. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. Progress and success are suggested by the magnetic fifth line in the ruler's place. Although he has nearly crossed the stream, the young fox has not yet escaped from the midst of danger and calamity. That's another thing. That's what I mean, is it can be helpful for me to do this, but still I'm in the midst of danger and calamity if the entire world goes to pot, just like we all are. Thus, it's necessary for something, to help kind of be a nurturing on the path that will allow us to develop more and more into what we are and out of what we think we are. Getting his tail wet means that the end does not reflect the intent of the beginning. Although the places, with the smoothest transition as possible, right? Although the places of the different lines are not those appropriate to them, yet a dynamic and a magnetic line always respond to each other. Like unfinished business is the reverse of completion. It means that the successful accomplishment of the matter at hand has not yet been realized. The crossing of the great stream is as yet incomplete. Some have wished that the I Ching might have concluded with completion, and the last hexagram have left us with the picture of human affairs all brought to good order, but this would not have been in harmony with the idea of change. Again and again it has been pointed out that we find in the book no idea of a perfect and abiding state. Just as the seasons of the year change and pursue an ever-reoccurring round, so it is with the phases of society. The reign of order has peaked and declined, and this hexagram calls us to renew the struggle to make things right again. It deals with the conduct necessary to secure this result. Not one of the lines in the hexagram is in its correct place. All the dynamic lines are in magnetic places, and the magnetic lines are in dynamic places. At the same time, each of them has a proper correlate, so there is the possibility of some progress. The symbol of the fox suggests a want of caution on the part of those who try to remedy prevailing disorders. They are unsuccessful and thereby get themselves into trouble. Line 2 represents this state of mind. He is dynamic in a magnetic place in the center of the trigram of peril. He is restless and attracted by his magnetic correlate in the 5th place. He will be incautious in taking action. The outcome of the issue will be different than what was intended at the beginning. The trigram of water is below and fire above, showing how the two principles cannot act on each other profitably. This symbolizes the unregulated condition of general affairs now prevailing. Notes and paraphrases judgment. Although many achievements fuel our growth, the ego is only the facilitator, not the doer. To ignore this truth creates negative consequences. Don't destroy the work. The superior man critically examines the situation and rechecks his priorities. This hexagram represents the time before the climax of a cycle, just as the preceding figure symbolizes the time after the climax, and hence the transition to a new beginning. The work is by no means almost over. The lines all match as correlates, but every one of them unites upside down, so to speak. Turn the hexagram over, and then they are in perfect correlation. That the superior man, that's the thing that it talked about emptying the mind and filling the belly, and also the idea of, in the alchemical language that Louis Mine was bringing up, it talked about turning the cauldron over or something like that. And so it's like we've got fire above water, it needs to be below. So a moving of the energy down into the lower dantian might be a way of not harming our brain. If we have all this energy up here, because that's what we think about, it needs to be up here, right? When it moves up. Well, apparently, from what I hear, it moves up and then back down, and you store it in the lower dantian. So that is a safer, better place to store energy that you cultivate. That the superior man discriminates among the qualities of things and the different positions they naturally occupy means that he knows that the correct positions of the lines, the ones they naturally occupy, are as in hexagram number 63, not this one. This backward correlation of lines, if you turn the whole thing over, it's correct, right? Is arguably a fair image of the relationship of things, of thoughts and feelings in the average human psyche. The stresses of life are what eventually break up these mismatched correlates through endless cycles of stimulus and response until they finally all unite correctly in a hypothetical completion of the great work. That this is an ideal rather than a humanly attainable goal is suggested in this quote from Tao Jung. The principle of the way finds its full development in heaven, the principle of heaven in earth, the principle of earth in the myriad things, and that of the myriad things in man. One who knows how the principles of heaven, earth, and all things find their full development in man can give full development to his people. For all practical purposes, it is wisest to aspire to attainable completions and realize that the work's full development is the self's, capital self, not the ego's responsibility. Which is why programming the subconscious is more helpful, I think, because it allows you to have that speak through you. Can be something where it's the self's job. I'm merely, a servant of that, if you want to describe it that way. And that it's my job to be better at intuiting what is coming from the self as opposed to my ego. And if you break it down just to the left and right hemispheres, it's like, how do we shift more into the right hemisphere at times where we need guidance at the very least? And when we're driving our car, maybe we're more in the left. Or, right, doing our taxes. For all practical purposes, if there's even taxes. Let's see. what happens when all of us shift. Maybe we're not meant to live like this in a lot more ways than you might imagine, but it all just takes things developing over time, and it is the self's work, not the ego's. Jung, the Tavistock lectures, to strive for perfection is a high ideal, but I say fulfill something you are able to fulfill rather than run after what you will never achieve. Nobody is perfect. Remember the saying, none is good but God alone, Luke 18:19, and nobody can be. It is an illusion. We can modestly strive to fulfill ourselves and to be as complete human beings as possible, and that will give us trouble enough. The judgment suggests that before any climax or resolution, there may still exist an indeterminate amount of free choice to influence the outcome. Only the specific circumstances can suggest how much or how little. As always, the choices are defined within the structure of the situation. The magnetic ruler in the fifth place implies that a favorable outcome is possible, but only through clear perception and willpower can it come about. The conditional interpretation, boldface italics added, in both Legs and Wilhelm's translation of the judgment is necessary for its text to make sense. Note that Ritzema/Karcher defined without direction harvesting as no plan or direction is advantageous. In order to take advantage of the situation, do not impose a direction on events. This is a common oracle response and sharpens the meaning here. Line 1 depicts the negative consequences of ignoring the judgment's explicit message. All right, now we can sum up the reading while we get a randomly card drawn chapter from the Tao Te Ching to close us out. People in the home. We need to keep an open hearth within. That yin principle we want, not in the heart, apparently, is what Louis Ming was saying. But he could be using alchemical language that Hilary Barrett wasn't necessarily talking about. Those are the two I'm comparing. Hilary Barrett talking about the woman in the home being the one that brought the family together, and it was also comparing it to like an open hearth and an open home that people could gather in. So an open space is necessary to remain open. For that aspect of things, if we have the left hemisphere coming in and trying to solve things and like putting shit around, it can do that to some degree, but it needs to leave enough space so that the place can be occupied by dinner guests and whatnot, that you're not so in your ego and that you can't commune with other people in your space. And that's kind of what the problem is. It's almost like we've embodied advertisement as a way of life. And so that's what we do in order to compete, especially on here. I mean, sometimes it's people's businesses and that's all, you advertise that and all of that kind of thing in this way that society lives. But to embody it all of the time to each other, and with competition being the backbone behind that, the whole thing becomes kind of corrupted, because all it is a bunch of egos getting together and clashing about and trying to like find, a pecking order, maybe be a good way to describe it. But you can delete any of that and just come inside into that open hearth and picture bringing people around, having an open hearth that the fire can burn in and all of that, you can bring the community of your own self or psyche around the sage inside. And so that center point, or that, the heart of the universe that projects all this out in like a quantumly entangled hologram or whatever this is, go back to that space inside yourself and keep it unobscured. Don't let even a grain of dust enter the lens of that or that aperture, and guard it. Guard that opening and work on expanding it. your bridge between the right and left hemispheres, that ability to move from infighting and cliques and who's fucking cooler than who and all of that can just be dissolved, along with the over-attachment to really making sure I understand my surroundings and whether or not I'm safe and all of those things. That's the stuff that's hard, because when we've had trauma or trouble with other people in big groups and things like that, you can talk about collective consciousness all day without worrying about it if it doesn't affect you in a way where it means you actually have to interact on a healthy level. And even if other people are not necessarily being healthy to you, you have to be able to, not just take all the shit, but also alchemize it within and then show up in a way that changes the dynamic, so that it's not doing what is expected of just counteracting, but kind of like a ability to flow around the issues, the strainers, that's what they call it in kayaking. When there's a tree laying in the water and it's a strainer, you could get caught in it and drowned. If you're upside down, not able to get unstuck from the river pushing you into this tree. Yeah, let's avoid some strainers. There's plenty of them right now going on in the world. And now, more than ever, and it's been more than ever each moment up until now, and it continues to be a more than ever as we move through time, would be a time to go inward. It's not yet time for the crossing of the Great River, and it actually says in the secret hexagram that it would be unhelpful to try and seek settlement too early, and also that there was no beneficial direction to go at the time, and don't seek to influence events with any direction. So that's very a numinous space. That's get into your right hemisphere, be in that space. We're not tinkering, we're not like vying for position or any of that. What we're doing is we're opening up a hearth within, and having that yin or woman of the home be something that brings your inner psyche around a center point of the void or the Tao or the great sameness, is what I like to, one of the things that it was described as in one of these writings that I used to read. It brings all things back to the great sameness. And that's very empowering too, because if we're stepping out into this new frontier of consciousness and we feel as though we don't have any competition, really, it's not competing against anyone, it's really a collecting and balancing and integrating and dissolving an alchemization of our internal worlds, we can maybe settle down a little bit and take the space or the time that we need, since there's not any pressure cooker situation as far as like, right now it's time to go. It says no direction is a good direction at the time. Basically, figure out what's going on with the ego stuff and that left hemisphere. The transition needs to be where we go through kind of maybe an ego death or a dark night of the soul or whatever you want to call it, where you make that transition point and you can put that part of you to death, if you want to be as dramatic about it as that. But that's the thing, is it may be something that you need to grieve. And what sometimes I do is, if I'm going through something, I emphasize it. It's almost like, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with, it's a type of health treatment where you use different herbs and things. And even like, so my ex, she had postpartum really bad after one of our kids was born, and she had to take homeopathics. They gave her squid ink. Apparently the squid ink, like the mother was always, almost like a predator to her children in this cuttlefish ink, is what it was, or something like that. And it had almost like you amplify that in the human body by giving you that energy. And it's almost like it tips it over or something, or puts it back into balance in some way. So sometimes a weird, interesting thing that I'll do is I'll just dive kind of into it and allow it to kind of use me to express itself out. It's maybe just something where I've boxed it up, and it does need to be voiced in some way, but it can be in a way that's not against anyone or wraps anybody into it. It can be on your own, that you have this kind of shedding of stuff, or, turn it into art and make it into a path where it's still guiding on the way, but showing what you're going through maybe, and putting it in the context of moving on. I don't know why I'm staring at this, but it's an oak, piece of oak. Druids, their name is after the same root word as oak in, I think, Gaelic, or I don't know, something. Which means, that root means door. And they wouldn't meet together unless there was an oak present. So it's pretty important. Its associations are Jupiter and Mars, and I believe the Sun as well. If you want to look at any of the associations of planets and the order at which I use different wands and what they're made out of, you can go in the description box below. I list all of that, so in order. And so if you can feel the energy coming through at a particular time and you want to find out what that means, it's easy to do. Put all that available to whoever. I just need to get a card now. I've got these crochet hooks here from my mom too. This is where she resides. Part of her. I'll take this one, 65. Step right up. Get out of here, 65, 35, 75, 95. What are you doing? Acting like a auction. 65 in the Tao Te Ching, the Eternal Tao Te Ching by Benjamin Hoff. Empowerment. We need to be able to be empowering towards one another, and way less critical of ourselves and others. The criticalness, I think, largely has to do with trying to fit into a mold. So if you feel like a pressure to force someone else to fit into a mold, or you putting yourself in a mold, I think that's kind of a warning sign of which part of the brain that's being acted out from. Not that all things from the left hemisphere are bad, clearly, but if you're talking about what we need more of in the world now, I would say something that binds people together is far more necessary. That love side, right? There's the ability to keep law and order on the left, maybe, if you want to look at it that way, or the father, and more of the love that binds things together, like the division and unity. And we need lots more unity. 65, simplicity. It said that we need to listen to the woman. That's what it said in Benabel Wins, is that society was measured largely by how they treated the women, and that they need to take the lead. So that being that part of the brain, that's where that's coming from, that yin space where that's the leader right now. So lots of the intellectualism and planning and that kind of stuff needs to kind of give way to a little bit more of an open way of having a connection to the source of our intuition and our ability to hone and listen to that very, very well. 65, simplicity. The rulers of ancient times who were skilled at following the way did so not to enlighten the people, but to hold them to the state of simplicity. The people are growing difficult to govern because they are much too clever. For that reason, he who governs with cleverness is the despoiler of the state. He who governs with cleverness is the benefactor. He who governs without cleverness is the benefactor of the state. He who knows the previous two principles knows moreover to examine patterns. To always know to examine patterns is what could be called profound virtue. Profound virtue is deep, far-reaching. It enables all to turn back to simplicity, and to thereby then regain the state of great cooperation. And then from Jia Fufeng and Jane English, 65. In the beginning, those who knew the Tao did not try to enlighten others, but kept them in the dark. Why is it so hard to rule? Because people are so clever. Rulers who try to use cleverness cheat the country. Those who rule without cleverness are a blessing to the land. These are the two alternatives, two hemispheres. Understanding these is primal virtue. Primal virtue is deep and far. It leads all things back toward the great oneness. Literally just quoted that. I love that one. It leads all things back to get to the great oneness. There was another Tao Te Ching translation that I want to read from if I can find it. It's a smaller book. Over here. I'm not sure where it is. Oh, there it is. The last place I looked. 65, chapter 65, Tao Te Ching. In the old days, those who were well versed in the practice of the Tao did not try to enlighten the people, but rather to keep them in the state of simplicity. For why are the people hard to govern? Because they are too clever. Therefore, he who governs his state with cleverness is its malefactor. But he who governs his state without resorting to cleverness is its benefactor. To know these principles is to possess a rule and a measure. To keep the rule and the measure constantly in your mind is what we call mystical virtue. Deep and far-reaching is mystical virtue. It leads all things to return till they come back to great harmony. That was John C.H. Wu. Next, we'll look at Nothingness and Zero, a Postmodern Approach to Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching by Jeremy M. Miller. Shout out to Core of Black Raven Meditation for that. She's the one who mentioned this in the first place to me, or just on her channel. 65 books. An empowered master or a skilled magician. These things have no consequence. There may be a divine law, but it is beyond the human power. Therefore teach nothing and keep the peace, allowing a neat path to zero. If we're quantumly interconnected anyway, or this is just all a projection and different energies exist in different, maybe like morphogenic fields, then imagine you trying to affect change without you coming correct, right? Coming with the energy of the change. So that would be the prime thing to focus on at this time.